Good morning, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to this seminar on promoting the climate resilient development through international cooperation here at the Japan Pavilion during COP30. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to the distinguished speakers who are leading global efforts in climate resilience and sustainable development. Mr. Kentaro Doi, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs at the Ministry of Environment of Japan, and Dr. Valerie Hickey, Global Director for Climate Change at the World Bank, and Ms. Luciana Tito, Head of the International Legal Department at the Brazilian Development Bank, PNDES, and Ms. Jessica Martinez, the Director General for Municipal Management and Urban Development, City of San Jose, Costa Rica, and Vice President of the Latin American Association of Urban and Territorial Planners, ALP. Climate change continues to pose serious threats to human security, especially in developing countries. Its impacts are compounded by the other global crises, biodiversity loss, and environmental pollution, forming what we face now as the triple planetary crisis. As Japan's Development Cooperation Agency, JICA is committed to addressing these interconnected challenges through climate resilient development, CRD, an integrated approach that combines climate adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development. To advance this vision, JICA is implementing 3 key initiatives. First one, TICAT Adaptation Initiative. This was launched at the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAT 9, in August 2025. This initiative promotes locally led adaptation, inclusive planning, and cross-border knowledge sharing. While rooted in Africa, it is now being expanded to other regions vulnerable to climate-induced negative impacts. And second, JICA Biodiversity Finance Impact Tool, Biodiversity Fit, a development guidance tool that promotes mainstreaming biodiversity in various sectors. It promotes nature-positive investment and helps integrate ecosystem restoration, conservation, and sustainable use into development planning. Last one, third, Midori Initiative. The mission for inclusive development by responsible investment. This Midori is the target, Latin America and the Caribbean region, home to the Amazon rainforest with abundant biodiversity and vital renewable energy resources. Through this Midori initiative, which Midori means the green in Japanese, JICA strongly promotes impact investing to the private sector with other partners, our partners, supporting green investments that combine climate action, biodiversity conservation, and circular economy principles. This initiative reflects JICA's commitment to building resilience through inclusive and regionally tailored approaches. Today's seminar reflects the spirit of Global Muchiron, COP30's theme of the collective action. By focusing on adaptation and resilience, we aim to turn global commitments into practical solutions that protect lives and strengthen communities. I encourage you all to actively engage in today's discussion. By working together, we can forge pathways toward a more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable future for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miyazaki. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Kentaro Doi, Vice Minister for Global Environment Affairs, Ministry of the Environment, Japan. Mr. Doi, please come to the stage.
I'm Doi Kentaro, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs. It is a great honor to join you at the opening of today's seminar on advancing climate resilient development through international cooperation. Climate change continues to pose severe challenges, particularly for vulnerable communities in developing countries. Addressing these challenges requires urgent and coordinated action to strengthen adaptation measures. These efforts are deeply interconnected with other global issues, such as biodiversity loss and pollution, that cause so-called three planetary crises. I hope today's discussions reaffirm the importance of promoting CRD as a central pillar of sustainable development. Collaboration between all stakeholders, including international organizations, governments, research institutions, and innovators is also essential. By maximizing synergies between climate action and the SDGs, while minimizing trade-offs, we can create pathways toward a more sustainable future. I am particularly encouraged by JICA's initiatives, include the TICAT Adaptation Innovation Initiative, the expansion of adaptation efforts beyond Africa, the development of guidance tool for mainstreaming diversity into development projects, and the Midori Initiative, which promotes impact investing in the Latin America and Caribbean regions. These initiatives will accelerate adaptation efforts and advance climate resilient development in vulnerable regions. I'm looking forward to the fruitful discussions and innovative ideas that will emerge today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doi. Now, may I invite Mr. Kyosuke Inada, Director General for Sustainability Management at JICA. Mr. Inada, please come to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. And before we start the panel discussion, let me briefly share the key perspectives and guiding questions for today's dialogue. So JICA places emphasis on adaptation to climate change as a matter of what we call the human security. In today's challenging global context, the importance of international cooperation is greater than ever. With that in mind, we have set three guiding questions for our distinguished panelists. Number one, why is climate resilient development critical for achieving inclusive and sustainable growth in developing countries? Number two, how can international cooperation enhance synergies between climate resilience and other development goals, including biodiversity, while minimizing trade-offs? And number three, what lessons from the African Adaptation Initiative, the TICAT Adaptation Initiative, can be applied to other regions to scale up climate resilient development globally? Also, taking this opportunity, although Ms. Miyazaki briefly mentioned these in her opening remarks, I would like to reintroduce and elaborate on three major initiatives that JICA is promoting. Next slide, please. First, you'll see the African Adaptation Initiative, the TCAD initiative, launched at TCAD 9 in August this year. This aims to achieve human security through climate resilient development in Africa. This initiative focuses on strengthening adaptation support, fostering collaboration and co-creation with external partners, and mobilizing private sector engagement. It promotes data-driven adaptation measures through digital transformation and data infrastructure, shares good practices via platforms such as the Coalition for Africa Rice Development and the African Clean Cities platform, and invests in human resources development through training programs in Japan for over 100 participants annually for 3 years. It also seeks synergies with ongoing TCAD contributions in resilient economic, social, and urban development. Next slide, please. Second, the Biodiversity Finance Impact Tool, Biodiversity Fit we call, currently under development, provides practical guidance for mainstreaming biodiversity in JICA projects and creating nature-positive solutions. It is designed for use during the early stages of project formulation, including planning and feasibility studies, and offers both general guidance and sector-specific advice for areas such as urban development, agriculture, tourism, water security, disaster risk reduction, and fisheries. This tool includes an ecosystem impact matrix and a list of response measures to help practitioners integrate biodiversity considerations effectively. Next slide, please. Third is the Midori initiative implemented through JICA's private sector investment and finance scheme, promotes responsible green investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. This 5-year initiative leverages private sector investment finance instruments such as loans and equity to support projects in climate action, biodiversity conservation, circular economy, and sustainable agriculture, incorporating both mitigation and adaptation measures. These initiatives reflect JICA's commitment to addressing the triple planetary crises, climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution through innovative, inclusive, and collaborative approaches. So thank you very much for your attention. And I would like now to introduce our distinguished panelists. So first, I would like to call upon Dr. Valerie Hickey, Global Director, Climate Change Group, World Bank Group. Please come to the stage. Next, we have Ms. Luciana Tito, head of the International Legal Department at the Brazilian Development Bank, Bundes. And last but not least, Ms. Jessica Martinez, Director General for Municipal Management and Urban Development, City of San Jose, Costa Rica. She is also the Vice President of the Latin American Association of Urban and Territorial Planners, ALPU. And before we start the discussion, I would like to pause for a second for group photo. So Vice Minister Doi and Ms. Miyazaki, please come to the stage. And Valerie and Ms. Tito, could you make way for them to be in the center? Thank you very much. And Ms. Miyazaki and Vice Minister Doi, please step down. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us today. And now I'd like to start our panel. And let's begin with the first question, which was, why is climate resilient development critical for achieving inclusive and sustainable growth in developing countries? And Dr. Hickey from the World Bank, I think you recently published a report, Jobs in a Changing Climate, Insights from Country Climate and Development Reports covering 93 economies. And it highlights how climate policies and adaptation measures can create jobs and support inclusive growth. So could you share how these findings influence the bank's approach to climate resilient development? And I understand you're sitting in Washington, D.C. with many changing environments, and I think you can tell us a lot from your experience. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. And certainly, I think adaptation is not just about being resilient these days to changes in weather and climate patterns, but it's about being resilient to changes in political, economic, and financial patterns, because they all intersect. And I think that's why it's so important. And I'm so incredibly grateful for the government of Japan and for JICA to be talking so much about climate resilient development, because for too long, we've had two separate conversations, one around development, one around climate. They are not different. They are the same. You only have to look at the case of Jamaica just 2 weeks ago, when Hurricane Melissa destroyed a decade of development investments at macroeconomic fiscal stabilization. Jamaica had done everything right. They had done everything that was asked them, and it didn't matter because the storm didn't care. Climate change didn't care. And now they have to rebuild at a moment when the political environment has changed and there's just less climate resilient development is so important. And for us, it is underpinned by two things. And DG, you spoke about it, so did the Senior Vice President and the Vice Minister. The first, of course, is the importance of data. And this is something we take very seriously at the World Bank. We're not just a bank in the traditional sense of having money, we're a knowledge bank. And we believe in AAA data, data that is it is accessible and it's affordable, so that it can be collected and distributed in every country, not just in wealthy countries. And for us, it's an incredibly important part of climate resilient development. First, because it's going to help prevent future bad decisions. All of the infrastructure, or at least half of the infrastructure that will exist in 2020, hasn't even started to be built. And 80% of that new infrastructure in emerging markets and developing economies. Data is going to help make sure that infrastructure isn't built in flood zones. This is especially important. One of the lessons we've had from TCAD, of course, is how important thinking through urban development and how do you do it in a way that reduces future vulnerability. And that's where data matters going forward. But it matters for the people who are vulnerable today, and how to feed it into information systems, early warning systems. At the end of the day, it's all about making sure existing investments are safeguarded, existing development is safeguarded. But of course, it's not just about data, it's about finance. And for us, this is, of course, extremely important. We see our job, and we invest $100 billion a year, half of that in areas that can be qualified as climate finance. We believe it's absolutely critical to optimize public finance, because every government is in debt distress. Every government is struggling to get the most out of every one of its dollars, but also to unlock private capital. That's why Midori, for example, is such a great initiative from JICA. And for us, that means focusing on 4 things, and I'll be very quick, DG. The first, of course, is around policy reform. And this is something that our country climate development report, when we look at the impact of climate resilient development, can have to ensure that we don't lose jobs going forward. And in fact, climate transition can lead to more jobs. The right policies have to be in place, whether it's repurposing subsidies so that scarce public resources aren't driving climate change, but they're helping to build resilience against it, to policies like land tenure reform, so that smallholder farmers can have access to the collateral they need to go and borrow money from the bank to be able to buy drought-resistant seeds, or be able to get access to mechanization to help them create a surplus they can deliver to the market. So policies matter, credible institutions matter. And this is something, again, that TCAD 1 to 9 has always emphasized. It's not about individual capacity building, it is about institutional strengthening. And this has never been more true than in the case of doing climate resilient development. Having strong institutions at the government level, but also in terms of micro and small businesses, community organizations, is the best de-risking instrument. It is the best way to attract money and success. Then, of course, we need resilient infrastructure, public infrastructure built in the right places, in the right way, so it doesn't get washed away in the next flood. That is climate resilient development, and it will attract private capital, because private sector, their math is very easy. It is investment against risk-adjusted returns. And what increases their returns is when there is strong, resilient infrastructure they can count on. Even with climate change, they know they can get their goods to market, they can get their customers to their product. And so building public infrastructure, resilient infrastructure matters. So DG, that's how we think about climate resilient development, why it's important, and some of the underpinning forces. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, for the very powerful message despite the noise. And I understand you may need to leave the session a bit earlier, but due to another commitment. But may I ask you or turn to you again concerning the third question first? I'm sorry. So what lessons from the TCAD adaptation initiative can be applied to other regions to scale up climate resilient development globally? And the World Bank is a core organizer of the TCAD process. And because of the thematic event we held in August, the TCAD adaptation initiative towards climate resilient growth, we had the privilege of receiving valuable insights from your colleague, Dr. Andrew Dabalin, the chief economist of the African department at the World Bank. But I'm very curious to know what your thoughts are on this third question. Thank you.
We've been incredibly proud partners of TCAD over the years because, of course, we have a shared commitment to ensure that the African continent can grow and it can be part of a global family that is prosperous and where nobody is left behind, no country is left behind. And I think the aspects of TCAD that have really resonated with us and why it's been one of our most important partnerships is that it is all about people first. It is all about making sure that we have the data and the investments and the technology transfer and the training so that people have more money in their pockets. They have more access to jobs. They have better and safer housing. It's not an abstract conversation. It is a conversation about people being better off and focusing not just on their economic development, but also on urban development, where increasingly more and more people are living, not just in Africa, but everywhere. And this is something that I believe will be very helpful, even though Latin America has long urbanized. There are still huge lessons in terms of how to think about secondary city growth and development, and the importance of land use planning in city development, which is something that we're not now only applying in cities, but we've taken some of the lessons from TCAD and the focus on urban development into the rural and the coastal space. We have a whole program at the bank on marine spatial planning, because some of the most vulnerable people to climate change are living at the coastal frontiers. Sometimes that means in cities. A huge number of cities in lots of parts of the world are coastal. And the poorest communities are moving to those areas that are most fragile, which are the areas that are right on the coast. Unlike in many high-income countries, where houses by the sea are owned by the very richest. In most poor countries, houses by the sea are owned by the very poorest. because they are constantly threatened, they are constantly inundated. And so one of the lessons we've taken from TCAD is how do you apply the lessons from urban planning, whether it's in policy or thinking about the jurisdictions at the different level or about infrastructure, and take it to the coast, including in rural coastal areas, where communities are trying to understand and make decisions about whether to stay or leave. Will the area, because of sea level rise, be unlivable in the future? Is it somewhere they can stay? So that's one of the areas from TCAD that we've spent a lot of time exporting from the urban area to the rural and to the coastal area. But the real lesson of TCAD, which for us we bring with us everywhere we go, is the importance of partnership and the supply chain of technical assistance and finance and linking it up. There's not enough money for each of us to run our own race. Often at the bank, we look across the landscape and we see everybody working very hard, spending a lot of money. But we're all running our own individual races, and so we're running 100 meters. We need to run a relay race so that each of us runs just as far, just as fast, but together we run 400 meters. And TCAD has really emphasized the importance of partnership, of coordination, of working together, not just across development partners, but with the countries and the cities and the communities in the driving seat, deciding what their future should look like and what their human security and economic development should look like. So those are some of the absolute precious lessons we've learned from years working with TCAD, and for which we bring with us everywhere we work, in Africa, outside, and in every sector. Thank you, DG.
Thank you, Dr. Hickey. So data, people, and partnerships, they are important, not just in Africa, but in other parts of the world. And since we have two distinct panelists from Latin America, I'd like to now go back to the first question, which is why is climate resilient development critical for achieving inclusive and sustainable growth in Latin America and developing countries? So Ms. Tito from Bundes, I think Bundes is hosting 3 major panels at the COP30, which is from strategy for climate finance in the global south to unlocking adaptation financing through public-private collaboration. And the third being the presenting Brazil's climate fund model for scaling finance. So from your perspective at Bundes, how do these approaches collectively support climate resilient development as a foundation for inclusive and sustainable growth in developing countries, notably Latin America? The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much for the questions, and thank you very much for the invite, for being here. I think, first of all, I couldn't agree more with the words of my colleague here. We are facing a very emergency situation in all around the world. You mentioned Jamaica. I would also like to mention that here in Brazil as well, last week, we faced a very severe situation in the south of Brazil, in the city, that was full destroyed. And also last year, we faced a very critical situation also in the south of Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul, where, for example, BNDES needs to support the economic situation of the state, giving finance to companies, granting stand still for companies that have credit with BNDES, and those amounts would be around $4 billion to support the reconstruction of the Rio Grande do Sul. So as you can see, we need to connect the system of finance, the system of cooperation, and the climate resilience is, we need to work now. We need to improve, as the colleague has already said, all the urban infrastructure, all the climate adaptation, not only the mitigation. We need to change the structure of the city so that they can be adapted for this new world that we are facing, right? And for that, we need money. And so, as you mentioned, BNDES has very support initiatives for the climate adaptation, climate mitigation. Since 2023, when the President Lula assumes the government of Brazil, BNDES has in its strategic partnership I would say it's know its credit analysis, the sustainability, the impacts of the social, economic, and environmental of a transaction, and analyzed by the team of BNDES. And to support those projects for climate adaptation mitigation, we usually the climate fund, as you mentioned, the climate fund is a fund provided by the Brazilian government. This fund was also created by President Lula in 2009, so it's a long time ago. But now the budget has been increased, not only from the oil and gas royalties that come from the export of petrol in Brazil, but also from the treasury borrowing. Recently, the government of Brazil issued green bonds in the capital market, and those resources borrowed from international market comes to BNDES, part of them, because part of them are used by the Ministry of Environment for non-reimbursable projects, and the reimbursable projects are managed by BNDES. We envisage a budget for the next year of around $4 to $5 billion for the climate fund, so that we can support projects in Brazil. And this projects involves urban mobility, electrification of buses, reforestation, renewable energy, and also green technology, for example. And in 2024, we reached a disbursement for green projects, as we call, not only renewable energy, but also green technology, innovation in the industry for the climate adaptation and mitigation, around $4 billion for 2024. So for BNDES, it's very important so that we can continue to support that. In addition to the climate fund, as you mentioned, it's also because the climate fund is a fund from the government, right? But we need to mobilize the private capital into this project as well. But how we can do that? We do that mainly in the capital markets as well. BNDES has recently launched a bidding for 5 billion reais, right? To call for 5 investment funds, 5 then for equity investment funds, and 2 for credit funds. Those funds will support projects regarding transformation, ecological transformation, and also nature-based solutions. And I would say we were very surprised because we received more than almost 45 projects for this bidding procedure, and they would bring for those transactions almost 7 billion reais. So it's a lot of money, right? We were very impressed about the result. Of course, this is still under analysis. We have received those 45 proposals, and now they are in analysis for BNDES. So the idea is to launch in 2026 the 7 funds that I mentioned. So we are able to bring the capital markets also into the transactions. I think the other one that's important to highlight is also the EcoInvest, which is a program from the Brazilian government as well, which was launched this year. We have 2 bidding procedures also concluded. BNDES has participated in 2 of them. And according to those bidding procedures, we were able to mobilize 90 billion reais for projects regarding climate change and adaptation, and also for restoration of degraded areas in Brazil. So we can see that we are able to connect the public funds to the private funds. So this is very important so that we can move forward, because as you mentioned, it's not only about financing, right? We need to mobilize to scale the projects. And I also would like to add the importance that you mentioned about that. For BNDES, it's very important the monitoring of all the projects that we finance, right? So we have a specific program called MAP Biomas, where BNDES analyzes if the project is being implemented in an area that has been degraded. If it is, BNDES will not support if the company is degraded in some area, so it's not eligible for BNDES financing, those kind of deals. And also the monitoring of all the projects. BNDES makes transparency and periodical reports regarding the climate fund, for example. If you enter into the website of BNDES, you can see the reports and all the effectiveness of the products that we are financing with the climate fund. And just an example, we are able to avoid emissions of greenhouse gas around 200 million tons of greenhouse emissions with the finance of BNDES. We're able to create more than 80,000 jobs with the financing from the climate fund as well. So you can see that it's not only about the climate, but it's also about including people in the jobs, getting people more, I would say, proper, sustainable life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tito. So I believe BNDES and JICA are both members of the International Development Finance Club, IDFC. So we hope to continue our collaboration on the finance front. But Japan being a disaster-prone country, I think knowledge partnership is also important. And JICA has a sizable office in Sao Paulo in Brasilia. And we hope to collaborate with BNDES and other Brazilian counterparties through our offices for inclusive and sustainable development in Brazil. Thank you.
No, yes, thank you. And yeah, I've just to add one point, we have a very good partnership with the government of Japan, right? With JICA, we recently signed the loan agreement for the health sector in Brazil, around 30 billion yens. And in this year, and also, as you mentioned, we have a very fruitful collaboration within the IDFC. The government of Japan is also a new donator of the Amazon Fund. So we also appreciate all this collaboration with the government of Japan. And we also have a very good collaboration with JBIC as well, who is a very good partner of BNDES. We signed the loan agreement with JBIC of $200 million US this year, exactly for renewable energy. So this cooperation between Brazil and Japan is very important. It's from a long time ago, right? It's a very good history from the two countries, and we can I would say that we need to scale this cooperation between all those kind of development institutions around the world, so that we can indeed make the world change and have a better position for the climate resilience.
Thank you, Ms. Tito, and sorry to keep you waiting in such a heated debate. And Ms. Martinez, I must start by congratulating you for ALPU having received the first JICA International Cooperation Award last year. Congratulations. And from your experience in the urban regional collaboration, and now is important.
Well, good afternoon. And first of all, thank you so much for the invitation to this panel. And also thank you to JICA for believing in ALPU and supporting the efforts being made for different professionals in Latin America to build more equitable and sustainable cities. I would like to give you some context about Central America and Costa Rica. Central America is one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change in the world, as the majority of low and middle income countries. And the main impacts includes longer droughts, more intensive raining and storms, floods, stronger hurricanes. Melissa was the last one, doing huge material and human damage, sea level rising. And the main effects are social, urban, environmental, and economics. And the most remarkable social and urban are produced in settlements and communities that are located in vulnerable areas and risk areas. And about environmental and economic effects are in agriculture, in food security, and water resources, and also in infrastructure. So there are two direct consequences, migration and rising poverty. So caused by environmental degradation, and either by the expansion of the urban frontier and the agricultural frontier too, about rising poverty because people loses their, homes, houses, properties, and production. So on the top of this, there is a low investment capacity of the local and national governments to confront these effects of the climate risk. In Costa Rica, I would like to talk something about my country. The urban development has been based in a low density model, similar to the US sprawl model, with a high dependency of automobiles, and it causes pressure over national resources and protected areas, and pushing the local and national government to build infrastructure in suburban land. And in other hand, we have a lot of infrastructure and services in the centers in the towns. So in other hand, the soil sealing of land as a result of the urbanization process and the overconsumption of land as a result of the urban growth was affect the hydraulic capacity of the natural and artificial systems. And climate resilient development is crucial to achieve an inclusive and sustainable growing, because it reduces community vulnerability to climate impacts. And it protects, of course, critical infrastructure, and it promotes economic growth without compromise natural resources. And climate resilient implies climate risk reduction, reduces the greenhouse gases, and biodiversity protection, and in all political decisions which are made. This aims that communities, economies, and ecosystems are able to adapt and anticipate and recover the impacts of climate change.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. So I understand that both Costa Rica and Brazil are the rich in biodiversity. And for the case of Brazil, the Amazon, no need to explain. In Costa Rica, you have been the global innovator for payment for ecosystem services. So you're the front runner in terms of environmental protection. So with that in mind, I'd like to move to the last question, the second one actually I asked, but so how can international cooperation enhance synergies between climate resilience and other development goals, maybe including nature positive investment and biodiversity, while minimizing the trade-offs? So I'll now turn to Ms. Tito again. So how does BNDES initiative not only strengthen resilience and sustainable development in Brazil and beyond, but also create synergies with other development priorities such as social inclusion and economic growth, while addressing potential trade-offs? Could you tell us your experiences? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. As I mentioned in the last wording, BNDES is very focused on providing all the social, economic, and environmental impacts of those transactions, right? This is the reason why we have all the monitoring of the deals, so that we can also provide information to the public, so that all can see what BNDES is doing and how we can help to create jobs in Brazil, to make it Brazil more inclusive a country, to provide all the resilience that we need to do in order to, I would say, to have this challenging of facing this challenging of the climate mitigation and climate adaptation as well. But regarding specifically about the international cooperation, I think it's very important to add, as I mentioned, the Amazon Fund. I think the Amazon Fund is a very good example how can the international governments cooperate in order to support the biodiversity, to support the inclusion, to support projects here in Brazil. We started the Amazon Fund in 2011, approximately, and it was stopped in 2018 because of the change of the government. And then we restarted all the transactions of the Amazon Fund in 2023, receiving more donations from countries. So when the Amazon Fund began, we only have the Norway and German and KfW indeed. And now we have, I would say, more than 7 country supports. We have Norway, we have German, we have Japan, we have Switzerland, we have US, you have UK, so we have a different Ireland recently, also Switzerland recently supported, Denmark as well supported the Amazon Fund. So we are able to reach more than 4 billion reais from supporting. It's not a huge amount. We need more so that we can finance, because the Amazon funds are no reimbursable fund, right? So we support no reimbursable projects here in the Amazon region, mainly regarding small transactions, small farmers, as you mentioned, so that they can have more sustainable producers for their farming. They can have the sustainability of the forest to avoid the deforestation, right, of the Amazon forest as well, and also to provide means for combating and avoiding situations of trafficking here in the Amazon, mainly regarding the woods, right? And also other crimes that are being conducted here in the Amazon. So the Amazon Fund, I think, is a very good example of how international cooperation can work. But also regarding the financing of BNDES as well, we were able to borrow from the international finance institutions around 40 billion reais from several different institutions, IDB, JICA, JBIC, KfW as well, AFD, and other institutions to support climate transactions here in Brazil. And we also negotiating now with the World Bank a new transaction of $1 billion US to support the projects of decarbonization. So bringing those funds from international institutions to Brazil to support the climate resilience is how BNDES can also bring funds from other countries for private companies to Brazil as well. But I think other point and very important relation regarding international cooperation is the exchange of information, right? The exchange of databases. We do it a lot through the IDFC, as you mentioned. It's a very important association of international DFIs around the world so that we can connect those information, exchange those experience. Because something that happens in Jamaica, in Costa Rica, we can also learn from that. How can we do to avoid those situations? If it's not avoidable, how can we try to mitigate, right, the risks or mitigate the impacts of those events that happen in those countries? So we can learn from lessons all around the world. So it's important to have these connections, to exchange the databases, to exchange the information from international finance institutions to support the climate resilience also in Brazil.
Thank you, Ms. Tito. And I now turn to Ms. Martinez. So you articulated very well the nature of Costa Rica's urban and territorial characteristics moments ago. But in your opinion, what approaches can help cities in Costa Rica and maybe other parts of Latin America balance the resilience with other priorities such as housing? I think that's your specialty. Mobility and economic development while fostering international cooperation to share the best practices. I mean, Ms. Tito just mentioned the importance of exchanging information, but how can this be tailor-made into the specific context of Costa Rica or other parts of Latin America? Thank you.
Yes, to balance the urban resilience and other priorities in Latin America, urban planning must be integrated with natural-based solutions. And we need more open green space. We need to rehabilitate our rivers. And it's crucial to think or rethink in our city model. And we need a more compact and density cities. And we need people coming back to the town, to the central cities. And we have to stop the mobilization of people toward the peripheries, to the suburban areas. And it is essential to the way how we transport ourselves. And the dependency of the private transport generates a lot of congestion and environmental pollution too. And also requires a high percentage of public space for the vehicles. So it affects the quality of life and, of course, the landscape, urban landscape. And in Costa Rica, high percentage of the urban rivers are enclosed in culverts with constructions over them. And the other that are still open, they are not visible. They are invisible because of the urban development has erased the presence of these rivers in the city, giving priority to road infrastructure and over the natural landscape. And most of the water courses are very polluted too, and which makes the rehabilitation hard because first we have to identify the sources of the contamination, and then we have to eliminate it. And finally, we must reintegrate the natural ecosystems and as a natural component and as a structural component in the landscape in the city. Additionally, the rainfall, the intensity of the rainfall and the soil sealing in the urban areas has increased the runoff, and making pressure over natural drainage and the artificial and natural drainage. And well, this is most of the main ideas about my country in this question.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez, for those wonderful ideas. And now I'd like to invite the panelists to reflect briefly on what you've heard from each other. And are there any points that you feel could lead to collaboration among yourselves or inspire your own work? And I see Dr. Hickey still around, so maybe starting from you. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, DG. I think that the two things that I'm going to take away with is first, that adaptation is not just for poor countries or poor communities. Brazil has some of the wealthiest cities in the world. This morning, I was on a panel on water management with one of the senior engineers for Sabesp, which is the water utility for Sao Paulo. And if any of you have ever been to Sao Paulo, you've seen pictures of Sao Paulo, this is the New York City or the Tokyo of Brazil. It is this wonderful, amazing city with the most incredible infrastructure, and yet it is struggling with managing a 40% decrease in water and a 70% increase in demand for water. And so the idea of climate resilient development is something that everybody's struggling with, rich and poor in every country, and figuring out how we can do the kind of technology transfer, the kind of training and institutional strengthening that TCAD and JICA remind us to do all the time, I think is true, and it's something that we need to do more. It's why an institution like the IDFC is so important to share those lessons. It's why on the World Bank side, we work together with our sister MDBs so closely to share experiences, because we all work in different places, but we need to share those lessons so we can accelerate learning. One of the things, for example, we've learned a lot here these last 2 weeks is from the Islamic Development Bank, one of the smaller MDBs, about how they're unlocking Islamic finance, Sharia compliant finance, that was a pot of money that's never really been used for adaptation, and all of a sudden can come to the table because of very innovative financial engineering. So that's the first thing, that this is something we need to do everywhere. The second thing I heard very much is this importance of connecting gray and green infrastructure. Whether it's in cities like San Jose, whether it's in some of the rural spaces in the Amazon that BNDES is really leading forward on, is that there is no single solution. We can't simply build our way out of something with concrete, nor can we simply expect nature by herself to give us the solutions, that it's this combination of gray and green infrastructure. And Jessica, I love the way you talked about the invisible nature in cities, and how do we make it more visible? How do we bring back the ability of nature to help us manage water in cities? How do we make sure the Amazon is still working for the river of rain that it brings everywhere from in fact, parts of the US all the way down to Chile and Argentina, that if it wasn't for the Amazon, we're not going to have the kind of agricultural security that the region provides. So how do we mix the hard engineering with the soft nature-based solutions and do it together, putting people first? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I fully agree with your words, right? So when we talk about the climate resilience, when we talk about projects to support the climate resilience, we need to create new solutions, but we also need to use what we have today, right? Because unfortunately, those solutions will not will come one day. We will wake up and the solution is there. No, so we need to construct. It's a long way that we need to follow so that we can have all those projects implemented. So we of course need to use what we have today. And as you mentioned also, we need to connect all the information that we have from all those local development financial institutions, the DFIs, and also from the multilateral development institutions, not only the financing, but also the knowledge, what the projects, how can we develop those projects? How can we have projects that are bankable also? How can we attract the private capital? We talk about trillions and trillions of US dollars to support those projects. How can we make it true, right? Because as usually our presidents say, the problem is not yesterday, the problem is today. We need to solve it today, and it's urgent. So we do not we not must sit and thinking about ideas. We must implement the solutions. This is the reason why this is the COP of the implementation, right? So we need to implement all the solutions. And I think the example of Japan and JICA, of all the climate resilience that Japan faces every day, right? And all the experience of JICA in supporting international cooperation of those climates, an example that must be followed by the other institutions. So I think in a brief word, cooperation between institutions, cooperation financing, cooperation of knowledge is essential so that we can develop the projects for the climate resilience.
Well, I think the use of technology is essential for monitoring, mitigating, and preventing the impacts of climate change and urban development in cities. And for this reason, I believe that the international cooperation funding is crucial for ensuring access and to technological tools and able to support the environmental monitoring and anticipate on potential natural hazard risk. And the collaboration is the most important thing between countries, between cities, between people, between professionals, and lowly sharing the knowledge. It's the very important thing to continue doing in between all Latin American cities, I think.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us your insightful comments. And using Ms. Tito's word, my problem today is to summarize this rich discussion, but I think I'll read out what is important for JICA from today's discussion. So the first takeaway is climate resilient development is not only essential for protecting communities from climate risks, but also for driving inclusive and sustainable growth in developing countries. And that has been stated in a number of different ways, but it was reassuring to hear from all of you that this is actually a consensus amongst us all. Secondly, international cooperation plays a critical role in creating synergies between climate resilience and other development priorities, such as economic growth, social inclusion, and biodiversity, while minimizing trade-offs. And partnerships across governments, development banks, and cities are key to achieving this balance. Third, innovative initiatives such as the TCAD Adaptation Initiative, Brazil's Climate Fund Model, and urban planning networks like LPU demonstrate how knowledge sharing and collaborative financing scale up adaptation and resilience globally. And finally, today's dialogue highlighted that addressing the triple planetary crisis requires integrated approach, leveraging both public and private sector resources and ensuring that solutions are inclusive, locally driven, and globally connected. So with that, I would like to thank all the panelists and also the participants for coming to today's seminar. And we appreciate your time and insights, and please enjoy the rest of COP30. But before that, please join me in giving a round of applause to our excellent panelists. Thank you very much.